Today's webinar is brought to you by the Rising Tide Mastermind. The Rising Tide Mastermind is a group of individuals that get together regularly, not only to help each other with our issues, but to help each other in all areas of life and get where we're going faster. Whether you join the Rising Tide Mastermind or another group, now more than ever, everybody needs a group of trusted advisors. The Rising Tide Mastermind is putting on this webinar series so we can focus on the things we can proactively do and not just simply worry about things that we cannot do during this unprecedented time. Our presenter today is Alston Causey, Vice President of Travelmation and a pastor at Gwinnett Church. Probably two of the most disrupted industries have been churches and travel. Alston has maintained a proactive approach to both of his vocations, and I must say he's one of the most positive people that I know. Today, he's going to share 4 key concepts on how we need to take care of ourselves as we are taking care of others during this crisis. Welcome, Alston.
Hey, thanks for having me, Trace. And I'll just echo back, man, I think you're one of the most positive guys that I know.
Well, I appreciate that.
Thanks for doing what you're doing. I think this
Absolutely. You know, one of my favorite books is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Covey says you can focus on the circle of concern or the circle of influence.
Yeah.
And I think now more than ever, especially with the news the way it is,
yeah.
If all you do is watch the news, you just worry about all these things that are outside of your control.
Yeah.
And if you focus there, you just feel powerless. But if you focus on the things that you can influence, well, now you can actually make change, or you can help others make change.
I couldn't agree more. Honestly, that's the intro to what we're talking about today. So you're spot on.
Awesome. I'm glad I helped.
Yeah. Well, honestly, thanks for having me, Trace. What my goal for today is honestly, I just want to add value to people, whether you are the CEO of the business and you're a listener to this podcast or this webinar series. I think that you have incredible potential in this season, or whether you just work at a company and you are, trying to grow your leadership. This is an opportunity. And I think when we're in crisis, one of the first things to go is our health. As the business goes, especially for those leading, as the business goes, so goes our confidence and so goes our health. And so my hope today is just to share 4 things that I've kind of noticed, picked up, like you said, in both areas of my life that have, kind of helped me and helped lead the people that are on our teams to stay healthy in this season. So I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I know you're gonna give a lot of advice and help some people today. I have no doubt on it.
Well, I hope so. I hope this helps you. And if you hear anything that's helpful, I'd love for people to reach out to you just to continue to affirm what you guys are doing. So I just shared my screen, and this is a brief keynote, but essentially what we're going to walk through here is what I think are the 4 keys to maintain health during this COVID-19 season, which it's funny, man. I feel like it's not funny, but it's amazing that when this first started, we all thought, hey, maybe this will last 3 weeks. Yeah. And now we're going on week 5, week 6 for some people. And so I think for those that thought, oh, I can just get by, maybe I'll take it a little easy and then I'll come back to work in a couple of weeks. I think now we need to really change some of our habits and change some of our, paradigms for what we're doing in our jobs and in our personal lives to maintain health. Because if you're not going to do it, you won't get through this season, or you won't get through it well. So like you said, I am a pastor at Gwinnett Church. I'm a vice president of a travel agency. I'm like you, Trace. I like to wear a lot of hats, but I think that keeps life exciting, right?
Absolutely.
So kind of what you said, especially related to Stephen Covey and the 7 habits, I think one of the things that I've noticed in this season is that when everything feels out of control, what we do is we try to grasp at things that we do have control over. And especially, like I said, for those of you that are listening that are CEOs, you have your business and you're just, I know a lot of the business owners I've talked to, they're just afraid they can't control anything. But what I want to challenge everyone listening to today is this idea that the number one resource you have the most control of right now, whether in this crisis or not in crisis, one of the number one resource you have control over is yourself. And so what can you do to maintain your personal health, not only right now, but outside of this crisis as well, so that you can effectively lead or add value to your business. And I love this quote. You and I are both Jeff Henderson fans, but he says, one of the best gifts you can give your team is a healthy, inspired you. And I would even challenge to say that you can replace that word team with one of the best gifts you can give your family. One of the best gifts you can give your clients is a healthy, inspired you. And I think when you are the most healthy that you can be, that's when you're going to lead the best that you can. So just diving in. Is that cool with you, Trace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're doing great.
Awesome. Well, these are the 4 keys. These are the 4 things that I've found when you prioritize these 4 things in this season, it's going to help you stay healthy. When you prioritize rest, and I know there's going to be pushback there. When you prioritize this idea of pressing reset, when you prioritize your relationships, and when you prioritize reframing success, when you do these 4 things, if you can get this right during this season, I think you won't just come out of it alive, you'll come out of it better than you came into it. And I think these are habits, these are things that you can honestly keep even once this crisis is over and continue to lead like never before. So let's just dive into this first one, this idea of prioritizing rest to stay healthy. I know that sounds so obvious, but I bet for the average listener and even myself, I'm an Enneagram 8. I've got a little bit of the Enneagram 3 in me. I want to achieve, I want to make progress. And especially right now when the business world just seems completely out of our control, the last thing we want to do is rest. We feel like we've got to put in extra work. We've got to put in extra effort. And I get it, Trace. I know that there are people out there that have half the teams that they did. They might not have anybody around them anymore. But I will say that if you don't prioritize your rest right now, you're not going to be able to lead at the capacity that you need to. And I think one of the greatest analogies I've seen with this is the idea of an iPhone. And I know you and I make fun of each other because you've got the Android, I've got the iPhone. But what my iPhone does is when it gets to 10% battery life, it will say, do you want to enter low power mode? And I think a lot of leaders right now are operating in low power mode. You've cut off everything that is not an essential function, and your mind and your body is just going, hey, this is all we can prioritize. We can prioritize breathing. We can prioritize digesting food. But when it comes to creative thinking or strategic thinking, if you're not rested, your body's not going to allow you to achieve those functions. So just like our phones, we've got to get charged back up, especially right now, because we've got to lead at a different mental capacity than ever before. Because who's led through a pandemic before? Every business that's out there right now has not existed during a pandemic. And so we've got to be at our sharpest mental abilities because we're making decisions that they haven't written books on just yet, right? There's not a guide through how to get your business through COVID-19. There are a lot of influencers out there that would like to provide one for people, but there's not a tried and true guide. So I would say as the leader, as somebody that's in your company, prioritize your rest so that when those decisions come, you can stay agile mentally, and physical rest plays into that too. Winston Churchill, he was famous for taking naps, and he led through a war. So if there's anyone that shouldn't have been taking naps throughout the day, you'd think, hey, Winston, that's probably not a great use of your time. But he said, no, if I want to lead like I've never led before, I need to rest. And so even if it's a 30-minute power nap, I think that's just one of those ways you can stay sharp and agile and present in this season. And so I've got a couple applications here, but Trace, if you've got other ones, feel free to chime in. But I would say going for a 30-minute power walk. I'm in Georgia. We've had great weather lately. I know some people wish it would rain, but I'm enjoying the sunshine. Just going for a 30-minute walk outside. And I would say there's 2 kinds of walks. You can either walk with your family, but I would also say it's okay to go for a walk by yourself too. That solitude is going to provide you mental rest. Taking a power nap, like we talked about. I would not recommend a 2-hour nap. I can't remember where I heard this, but the idea that if you fall asleep on the couch, holding your keys, that when your body falls asleep, you drop your keys and you put like something metal underneath. The falling keys will wake you up. That's exactly how much your body needs to recharge for that day.
Interesting.
So an interesting tip. If anybody tries that, have somebody film you so I can see it.
I remember seeing something in Inc. magazine that had
Mhm.
like 10 key tips to have a power nap. I'm going to see if I can find that and share
Oh,
that.
that'd be great. Yeah.
I think I remember one was you're supposed to down a cup of coffee right before you take a nap. So that way it kind of hits you during the nap. I
Oh,
don't
that's
remember
interesting.
anything else.
Yeah. And I'm reading a book. It's interesting that you said that. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I'm going to put a link to it at the end. But one of the things that he keeps saying is we're not prioritizing rest, and we're constantly going to those things that artificially provide us energy. So we're going for 4 cups of coffee, 5
Mhm.
cups of coffee, but you're not resting. You're not getting more energy. You're just kind of continuing to use the iPhone as it goes from 10% down to 0%.
Yeah,
And
we're not going to low power mode. We're going to full power and seeing
yeah,
how far we can get.
right, trying to manufacture that energy, but it's not going to be your best thought process. So those are some ideas I have for rest, and I just want to leave the listeners with this question. We're going to have a question for each of the keys to prioritize. Ask yourself these questions once a day if you want. Ask yourself these questions once a week, but hopefully they'll help provide you a way to kind of align yourself to these ideas of how can I stay healthy during this season. And the first question is this: where in your day can you find 30 minutes of rest? Because I would bet that even the busiest person out there, the busiest leader, you can find 30 minutes of rest, whether it's either waking up before your family and just having those 30 minutes of solitude. I know you and I are both big proponents of quiet time in the morning just to start your day off well. But where can you find 30 minutes of rest? And I wouldn't say that rest is watching an episode of Tiger King. Even though Netflix seems like rest, you're not moving, you're still mentally engaging, and especially that show. We don't have to go down that rabbit trail. But I
Wow.
wouldn't say binge watching Netflix is going to provide true rest for you. So,
You know,
but
and I want to say that something good that's come out of all this is we all have a different day to day. I mean,
exactly.
it's just stopped and we're now learning what our new day to day is like. And now where people say, I just don't have 30 minutes, they've seen so many things change.
Yeah,
Why not bring this into?
that's a great point. Yeah, why not try it now when most of us don't have a commute? Maybe your commute bought you 30 minutes of time that if you build that habit now, maybe you'll sustain it after this is over. That's a great point. I think it's really interesting. I feel like even though I'm in less meetings time wise, because Zoom meetings take the place of my regular meetings, I feel like 30 minutes in Zoom world feels like an hour in the real world. So I don't know if that effect is happening to anyone else, but I'll come out of a 30-minute Zoom meeting feeling like I just was in a 2-hour brainstorm.
No, I totally agree with that. We were speaking about Tim Fulton, my coach,
Yeah,
and he says Zoom calls are like you need to count them in dog years. So
that's a
7
great point.
times a
Yeah,
regular meeting equals a Zoom meeting.
right.
And you know, something different that I've never done is I facilitated an entire day's worth of meetings where I was working with the team over Zoom. And I didn't think that could be
Yeah.
done before, but we did learn it could be done. But we also learned that if we did the entire 8 hours, that was just going to be crazy. So we would do an hour and a half at most. Normally, every hour we would take a break.
Yeah. That's a great point. And especially for those of your listeners that are leading those meetings, I find that it's even more taxing to lead meetings on Zoom because you're trying to constantly make sure somebody's not talking over somebody else. So like we said, now more than ever, it is more important to prioritize your rest and staying healthy in the season. That's great. All right, Trace, you ready to jump into the next
Let's
key?
do it.
All right. The next one I would say is this idea of pressing reset. All right. And that seems like such a simple thing. In a lot of people that I've heard and listened to, they feel like what this virus has done has actually been a giant reset button on the world. And there's a lot of bad that has come out of that. And we won't even get into that. But like you said, we can try to focus on the things that we can control, the things that we can stay positive in. And so what I'm trying to do is use this season as a reset button for these 3 things: my habits, my goals, and my team's job descriptions. And so with the habits idea, you know how New Year's Day kind of has that restart effect? You feel like the slate has been wiped clean. That's what I'm trying to capture in this season is I'm giving myself permission. And I would say for those of you that are listening, not only to give yourself permission, but to give your team permission on resetting your habits. Start eating better. Start trying to exercise once a day or once a week to get those habits in a good rhythm. Like we said, it goes back into the rest idea. But if you can get these habits built in this season, they're going to continue after this season is over. So if you need to start reading more, if you need to start resting more, give yourself permission to reset your habits. The second factor of that is I would say that it's really important to communicate the idea of resetting your goals. I know this especially came into play for us in the travel industry. We have about 500 agents on our team, and we did two things. We over communicated in this season. We tried to have daily Zoom calls for a little bit. Now we've kind of dwindled them down to about 2 or 3 times a week. But we said it's important for us to know that you and knowing what's going on is a priority. And in that, what we realized is a lot of agents were feeling anxiety that they still had to meet the goals they had set at the beginning of 2020. And so even though us as leaders, we would probably know, oh my goodness, if there's no way I would hold you to that same goal. We're in a global pandemic. They hadn't felt the release because we hadn't communicated it, that it was okay. And so as soon as we communicated that to our team, that we said, hey, here's the deal. If you want to keep the goal you set for 2020, go for it. We think that you can still achieve really, really well. There's still a lot of opportunities out there. But if you need permission to press reset on your goals, we're giving that to you. If you want to create a new goal from now till the end of 2020, go for it. Because it's just not fair, in my opinion, to hold people to the same standards that we saw at the beginning of 2020. And so that was just one of the things we did for our team, but we found a lot of success in just relieving stress and providing health for people in that idea of pressing reset. And then the third component of this, I think you and Tim actually talked a lot about this in the webinar, which was so good, but the idea of resetting what not only people do in their jobs, but even resetting what does your company do? What does your organization do? Because if you can change and tweak and figure out what do we need to look like right now, and what are we going to keep coming out of this season, maybe your company is going to be able to grow in a way it's never grown. Maybe it's going to branch into a new area that it hasn't branched into. Maybe you're going to see efficiencies that can be developed. I know you and I were talking about this. Maybe we don't keep all the Zoom meetings, but we keep a few of them because it does provide efficiency. I feel like people are more tactical when it comes to a Zoom meeting because we all want to get off. So resetting job descriptions, resetting organization descriptions, and just allowing yourself to get creative again, to go, what do we need to keep from this season? And that's the question for this section is what ideas or changes, and this can be personal, this can be for your business, what ideas or changes do we need to keep from this season? That's going to help you provide a positive mentality on this rather than everything about this season is crashing down on us. And I know I have some friends over at Chick-fil-A. This is one of their key statements that they're walking through this season is, what do we need to cut right now? That's what everybody's thinking. What do we need to cut? But there's also this idea of what do we need to keep? And I think that's a great question to challenge yourself, even to circle your leadership team, probably on Zoom, and to ask this question together.
I love that concept because so many people think that if they abandon their goals, that it's going to be a bad thing. Yeah. But I think you explained so well, if we try to hold ourselves accountable to something that's not attainable, that's just not healthy.
No, I agree. Yeah. And a lot of people are familiar with the idea of SMART goals. And that's the A is this goal attainable? It might have been at the beginning of 2020, but is that goal still attainable now? That's a fair question to ask yourself if you're an achiever and you hold yourself to high standards. But it's also a really good question to ask your team.
And I also think it's important that, okay, well, maybe we're not going to do this goal, but we need to replace it with something. We need to rally around an idea
Yep.
where we can all make sure that we're going to get out of this on the other side, better than we would have without this goal. Now, what is that goal that we're collectively going to come up with?
No, that's a great point, because it's not, the goal shouldn't just, and maybe it is, but I don't think the goal should just be survive. I think that's a good goal, for this season specifically. But if survive is your goal for the end of 2020, you're not going to be in a better place. So maybe it's a short-term goal paired with a long-term goal. Hey, here's what we're going to do to make it through, and here's what we're going to do to make it better. Might be a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and I've really found in teams and other people that I work with, when maybe they need a little help getting to the right question. But then once that team can rally around that question and you have that synergy of everybody feeding off of each other, and well, what if we do this, or what if we do that? And what can come out of a meeting like that has just been incredible. I've experienced it numerous times with my team. And because we've done that, we're actually, I don't want to say we're excited about anything in COVID-19,
Right.
but we have hope, and we can see that we all have a direction that we can steer towards to help us get through the other side.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Trace. It's so important to think about the future, because if you're not thinking about the future, you don't have hope that it's going to come. And so just like you said, rallying your team, so many people have been a part of those conversations lately of, we need to cut things. What are we cutting? But if you could challenge your team to go, what do we need to start doing? Or what do we need to keep from this season? That's future thinking. And that shows people we're going to get through this, because not enough people are hearing that right now, that this will end, and it will. This will be a story that we tell one day. And I love, I think you and I both heard Andy Stanley say this. He's like, what is the story you want to tell coming out of this season? Do you want to say, oh man, we had to let all those people go and that was all we remember? Or yeah, we had to make some cuts, not only with people, but with ideas, but we also rallied around the things that were going to keep us moving forward. I think that's really important. And you and Tim talked a lot about that too. So that was a great webinar you guys did.
Yeah, and you brought up Andy Stanley's message. That was maybe the first week of COVID-19. I think he said that.
Yeah, it was really soon.
I remember at that time I was focusing, and I just did a podcast on this very thing yesterday.
Yep.
But I was focusing on all the things that I couldn't do.
Yep.
And I don't like to be there. That's not the kind of person that I am. And I felt closed in. And then I feel this huge responsibility for all the people that I'm responsible for. And it just wasn't a good place.
Yeah.
And that Sunday, Andy said that message.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, okay, well, 10 years from now, when we do tell this story, am I doing the things today that allow that to be a story worth telling? And I remember thinking that I can do a better job. Yeah. And I decided right then and there that I wanted to be known for somebody who tried to help other people during this time. So, and I know you've got the same hope for this, but that's why we started doing the webinars. That's why we started doing extra podcasts. That's why I started bringing on more people that I could coach through this. Yep. Not that I know anything that they don't, but sometimes just being able to talk through some things with somebody.
Yep.
So I'm glad you brought that message up. That was a turning point for me. And again, that was the real shift where I stopped thinking about things that concerned me. Yep. And started focusing on that circle of influence, things that I could actually do.
Yeah. And I think like what you said, that's so huge. You can still add value to people in this season. And there might be a leader out there where when you're hurt, this is a common phrase in the counseling world, is that hurt people, but healthy people help people. And so if you can get yourself healthy again, you're going to put yourself in a position not only to help yourself, but to help your team, to help your clients, to help your customers, and to help your family. And I think that's really important. So let's dive into the third key to prioritize in this season. And I would call that the relationship key. It's really important here. And this sounds so obvious. A lot of these keys, they don't seem that far off. But I would say that it takes the work. You've got to put in the effort to make them happen, because it's one thing to know the right answer and it's another thing to act on the right answer. So if you want to stay healthy during this season, you've got to prioritize your relationships. And I think that it's been interesting that people have been thinking that they're prioritizing their relationships, but I would ask yourself the hard questions of, am I really prioritizing? And I would say specifically with clients, I've gotten probably 150 emails from any brand that has ever had my email address telling me their stance on COVID-19. And I'm sure you've gotten the same ones. I'm sure your listeners have. That isn't what I'm talking about here. That is good. I would say that's a start. Even at Gwinnett Church, we talked corporately to all the attendees about what was going on, because you have to acknowledge it. But then what we did is we followed that up by getting very personal. Everybody on our staff started calling attenders. We started personally calling them. And I know that sounds like so much work. It sounds like so much extra effort in a season where you just don't know that you have that much. But I would challenge people to do for one person what they wish they could do for all their clients. Do for one client what you wish you could do for all of them, and make those personal touch points. I saw this as well with my clients in the travel industry. At first, I sent an email to everyone saying, hey, I'm paying attention to all of this. We're aware of what's going on. But that didn't make an effort. I didn't hear anything back about that email. What I did hear back from was when I personally reached out to every client, even if they didn't have a trip that was directly affected yet. I just personally called them and said, hey, I just wanted to see how you're doing. Not even about their trip, just to see how they were doing. Because I will say, Trace, there are people like you and I that seem to be more positive and more optimistic. But I would say the majority of people out there, and probably the majority of your listeners' clients or customers that they interact with, they're really, really anxious right now. And so even hearing from someone that that is outside their immediate circle shows that personal touch point. It shows that you care. That's a way, and this isn't about making more money, but that is a way that you can provide a client interaction that they're going to remember way after this is over. And so those personal touch points right now, I would say, are one of the most important things you can prioritize, especially so that your business can stay healthy. But that's going to help you stay healthy as well.
I totally agree with that. How people and businesses act right now is how their reputation is going to move forward after this. I could not agree with that more.
Yep. And I would say it trickles down from your team. And so that's where this next point comes from, is if you're not having those personal touch points with your team, they're not going to feel challenged to have those personal touch points with their clients. And so it's one thing to gather the team on Zoom. That's important. But for me personally, I've tried to keep bi-weekly, we call them one-on-ones. And that's just 30 minutes set aside for me to ask how they're doing personally, ask how they're doing professionally, and see if there's anything that I can do to help. And sometimes those are just really conversational, but a lot of times that can be really encouraging. I can provide truth where somebody might have, started to feel really anxious about the season, anxious about their job. And so I think a lot of leaders have one-on-ones when there's, feedback to give, but it's even more important now to have those one-on-one personal touch points just to encourage people, just to encourage your team, and then to challenge them to do the same for those people that they lead.
Awesome. I'm just thinking we've got some people listening today and they're thinking all those things are a great idea, but how do I start a conversation like that? How do I get somebody? So it's like, you want to talk about something with COVID-19?
Yeah.
Who knows if they'll even say anything about that.
Yep.
But how do you get really to the personal and professional questions like you just asked?
I mean, it's been really interesting. We have these lists of phone numbers and not everybody answers, but I will say what's been interesting is that more people are answering right now because they're at home. So you actually have more opportunities to have those personal interactions. And I just start the conversation by being honest. I said, hey, we are just reaching out to see how you are doing. And it's not about business. It's not about the trip. But it's just to say, hey, we are just challenging ourselves to reach out to people and just to be honest about that. And they don't care if they are part of a call list if they're getting a personal call. Mm-hmm. I think that's different. If they're getting an automated voicemail or an automated text message, that's not going to provide the impact. But if you just say, hey, I really wanted to make it a priority to reach out to all my clients during the season just to check in on them. That's how I've started all the conversations, and it's been received well. A lot of people especially in our church, because our church is a larger church and a lot of people consider it a mega church. They're saying, I can't believe my church would have this personal of a touch point. And so the bigger your business is, I think the bigger the opportunity for you to capitalize on right now.
Great point.
So, and then I also think that trickles down from your family. Some people are single, and if you are, I would say it's okay to, have touch points with those that are outside of your immediate stay-at-home orders. But if you have a family and you are at home with them, here's the trap that I fell into at the beginning of this and quickly realized it wasn't healthy, is that I thought just because I was working from home and being around my family more, that translated into more time with my family. It's not the same thing. The quality time is completely different. And so I had to be really intentional, not only about asking and trying to be helpful in those, but really just to, start up a great communication. Just like we know it's important to over communicate with our clients and our team right now, it's also really important to over communicate with our family and with our spouses and the people that we live with, because they're in just as much of a cloud as we are. But I think as leaders, we naturally think, oh man, I've got to touch base with my clients. I've got to touch base with my team. And then you forget about the people that are, like you said, in your immediate circle that really need to know that you care about them right now. And so I would say just because you're under stay-at-home orders doesn't mean that you're mentally staying at home. I feel like I'm more distracted at home than ever before. And I have a 4-year-old. He picks up on that. He's like, I just want to play chase. I want to be Darth Vader and run around the house with you. So I do have to intentionally remove myself sometimes so that he doesn't feel like I'm always saying no. But I do make it a point to, when I have that time or when I'm going to make that time, to intentionally go to him or to go to my wife and say, hey, this is quality time. I want to invest. I want to talk. And it can seem awkward at first. Like you said, sometimes the beginning of those conversations are weird, but it is so important to at least try to start them and to start, especially if you have kids, the play time, because I feel like I've had to be in bossy mode more often because we're all working from home. You're trying to get your kids out of the Zoom and that can feel like, you're taking away value from them. So it's even more important when you're off the Zoom, when you're able to shut down, to go and back and add value to your family there.
Yeah, I love that point, because people think being with somebody else is the location. I'm near somebody. Well, no, it's about connecting with that person.
Right.
So, we have to be intentional about that connection.
Right.
So great point. I also can't help but comment on, I remember when I would do conference calls before this.
Yep.
And if something came in the background, I would really get upset. Oh my gosh, now it's not perfect.
I'm so sorry.
We have so let go of that. I mean, I've had so many conference calls interrupted. Somebody's 4-year-old, we run around the background, and it just is what it is. I think that's one of the good things that has come out of this. We're a lot more now I can't talk, accepting of not being perfect. And little things like that, I think, is adding some fun back into all these things that we're having to deal with.
I agree. I completely agree. One of my favorite memes before this started was that, I think it was a newscaster that was stuck at home trying to do a webinar or something, and his kids keep running in.
I remember that.
The housekeeper runs in, and it was chaos, and it was funny back then because that was so out of the norm. But now if you saw that video, you'd be like, oh, that's my.
I was just on a call like that this morning. Yeah.
It's funny, and this could be a quick tweak to make for your organization right now if you haven't already. When we call in, specifically in our travel agency world, when we call into Disney, they have an automated thing that says, hey, everyone's working from home. Please go ahead and excuse dogs barking in the background, kids screaming, just to be proactive about it, like you were saying. Because I think for those of us that are in this realm and we're constantly on Zoom calls, we get it. We get that it's normal. But just to help coach people that, hey, there's a different expectation right now. I think that's just a sidebar, but I love that they did that. And I thought,
well, since you brought up the Big D, they're one of my favorite companies.
Yep.
I study so much about customer service and more customer experience because they get it right.
Yes.
So you work very closely with them.
Yeah.
What are some lessons that you've learned from them during this crisis?
Man, I'm exactly like you. I don't just love the parks because they're fun. I think Bob Iger is one of the greatest leaders that I've seen of this generation. He's done a lot right in this. I don't know if you saw recently, he right before this started, I want to say that it was the week before this started, he just announced his successor. And so Bob Chapek had stepped in as CEO the week before COVID-19 started, the week before all the parks across the world shut down, things that have never happened before. And about a month went by, and I think they've been playing it by ear. They've been watching it, as we all are. But one thing that he did this week that I thought was really notable is that he actually came back in as CEO. And I think that was an interesting move because he is very good about seeing the future and seeing what's coming and trying to help the organization stay healthy. And I think he's anticipating there's going to be a lot of downsizing. There's going to be some shifts that have to be made company-wide. And I think he made a smart decision there because you don't want your successor's first move as CEO to have to be downsizing the company or shifting everything about what was working before. And so I think even though it looks strange from the outside that he's coming back into that role, I think it's going to position them to get through this. And I think he was feeling great. His 15 years at the company have been unprecedented in the amount of growth. I mean, you and I are big Marvel fans. He bought Marvel. So his success sheet was looking great. And I think it was really humble of him to step in and say, I'm going to help lead through this crisis when I could have just gone out on an awesome rap sheet of what I did as CEO. But there's a lot that they're getting right. Honestly, I'm so grateful for a lot of the vendors in the travel industry that are just continuing to put guests first. Disney's done that. Royal Caribbean has done that. And like you and I talked about, the ones that are getting this right, the ones that are being generous with cancellation policies, even if it's going to hurt them in the long run, they're the ones that are going to keep the clients when this is over. Because we've also had vendors, and I won't mention them by name, we've had vendors that have been really sticky about their cancellation policies where people aren't even allowed to travel to those countries anymore, and they're still charging them cancellation fees. And you could argue what's fair and what's not, but I will tell you that those companies are going to suffer after this because they're leaving a really bad taste in clients' mouths.
Yeah, about the only touch I have in the travel industry is I'm a dive instructor.
Oh, great.
And I do scuba dive lessons at a dive shop, and we sell trips through that dive shop.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our trips have been canceled.
Yeah.
In fact, we were supposed to go to the Cayman Islands in late May, early June.
Mm-hmm.
And the island said, nope, nobody's coming in here until early June. So that's after our trip would leave.
Right.
Well, some of the vendors are charging cancellation fees for that. Our dive shop owner is not charging those to his customers. He's eating that.
Yeah.
And that's really hurting him because he's been closed since this started.
Yep.
So it's our hope that goodwill is going to carry more message because he's really going out on a limb. He's spending money that he doesn't have coming in right now. But it wasn't the client's fault. So he doesn't feel that they should be penalized.
Right. And I'm not trying to make light of it. I know that these are really hard decisions, but exactly like you said, the ones that are, kind of owning it, I think they're the ones that if they can last through this, they're going to stick around and be in it for the long haul. That's awesome. All right, let's go to the third question, and then we'll dive into the fourth point.
All right.
So the question for the relationships section is very simple. What relationship can you add value to today? Is it, I need to add a little bit of relational capital to my spouse. I need to add some relational capital to my clients. But every day there's going to be a relationship you can add value to. And so just challenge yourself to ask that question.
Are you familiar with the emotional bank account with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Yep, exactly.
So we're making deposits right now. So how can I make a deposit into somebody? I love it.
Yep, that's exactly right. And a lot of, like we were just talking about, a lot of people are making withdrawals right now, but you can be different and you can add value. All right, the last one, this is, I would say, the most interesting of the 4 things to stay healthy. And I didn't actually stumble upon this until it was necessary in my own world, because very similar to the idea of resetting your goals is this idea of reframing success. And this is where I would say for the person, the CEO, the person that's in a job that feels like they've lost everything right now, this is where I would challenge you to reframe what success looks like, because this is a very difficult mental shift to make. But if you can make this mental shift, you are going to stay healthy through this. And so one of the ways that we've done this, like we said earlier in the travel industry, we reframed what success looked like for our agents. We said, we know you're not going to be selling right now because these destinations are closed. And so instead of judging your success from the number of sales that you do, judge your success on the number of touch points you make. So if you had 100 touch points this month with clients, that is a great indicator of success. If you write 10 thank you notes to the travel vendors that we're working with in this season that are taking the brunt of this force, that is a huge win. And as leaders, we have to help for our teams to define what these new markers of success are going to be, because it might not be sales right now, but that doesn't mean that you still can't succeed. If your people feel like they can't succeed at anything right now, that's going to be incredibly discouraging. But as a leader, if you say, no, this is our measure of success in this season, you're going to keep your company engaged and you're going to keep them moving forward. I also really like this idea of success versus excellence. If you define success right now, and this is another Jeff Henderson quote, but he says that success is deemed by looking at culture around us, where excellence is looking at success versus our own potential. So you can achieve your own potential without having to look at culture around you. Especially right now, there is such a comparison trap out there of, oh man, well, we're not doing as well as that industry because they're an essential business. That may be true, but if you change your version of success to be excellence, like we have done as excellent as we can in serving our clients, serving our customers, serving our teams. And yes, there are ways you can pivot your business model, but if just in the off chance that you can't, in the off chance that there's nothing left you can do, you can still strive for excellence, even if it's just finishing well. And then the last thing that I would say on that is this idea of gratitude. And I got this quote from Man's Search for Meaning. It's a great book. It is written by Viktor Frankl, exactly. And so he was in, I want to say it was a Nazi prisoner camp, and everything was taken from him, either Nazi or Japanese. I can't remember exactly.
It was Nazi.
Yeah. Everything had been stripped from him. He said he could not find success anymore until he stumbled on this idea. And he says this: everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And so just to challenge the leader out there, and just to be real, you may have lost everything, but there are still things that you can be grateful for. There's still an opportunity for you to choose your attitude in this season. And so I know that it can seem really touchy-feely. It can seem very emotional, but it is a big, big deal. And I would say, don't give up, even if you've lost everything. I know personally people that have chosen to take their lives in this season. And I would say, don't give up. There is still ways to find success. You might have to change your definition of what success looks like to you personally. But even if you are on the brink of just not having anything, you can still choose your attitude. You have the ability to choose that there are still things that amongst everything we've lost, there are still things that you can be grateful for. And I have seen from my friends that are leaders, from my friends that are CEOs, where they've had to let their entire staff go. They've had to lose all the sales. This is the thing that still keeps them motivated, is going, yes, I've lost my business, but I still have my family. Yes, I've lost my sales, but I still have my health. There are so many things left to be grateful for. And so the question from this one is that in spite of everything going on, what are you grateful for? And I want to tell the listener out there that has lost everything. I know it sounds really hard to find something to be grateful for in this season, but find people that you can, circle around you. And I think that's such a great benefit of this webinar series, is that you're saying we want to provide community for you. Because even if all of this is going on around you, find someone to connect with, because this is not happening just to you, and you can find community, and that can help you stay healthy in this season. And I'll end with this idea. I heard this from a great leadership coach of mine. He said the number one leadership challenge out there isn't, our success. It's that leaders constantly underestimate what they are capable of. And so I would just challenge every leader that's listening to this right now, whether you're the leader of the company or a leader within the company, I think that we are constantly underestimating what we are capable of right now. And we can change the things that we do. We can change our habits. We can change our goals. We can press reset. We can pour into our relationships. And those are the things that are going to help us stay healthy in this season. So that's all I got for you, Trace. Anything you want to add to that last section?
No, I think that was great. I love that you brought up Viktor Frankl. He gets talked about a lot, and I keep on bringing up the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Folks, I guess
book.
If you're listening to this, if you have not read that book, this is a great time to read that book. But Dr. Covey references Frankl, where, it was a Nazi camp he was in just because he was Jewish. Yep. And the Nazis were doing sterilization techniques on him, probably without any anesthesia. And I can't imagine what that was like. Yeah. And it was during that procedure that he realized that they could take his liberty, but they couldn't take his freedom. Yeah. And that lived inside his mind. Yeah. And while they were performing these horrible tortures on him, he was in his mind. And I think he was a professor, but I can't remember what he was a professor of. He was lecturing to his students, and he was making lesson plans on how he would now lecture to his students. And the point was that, you can, your mind is where everything is. So if we can fix our mind to where we're going, the mind's going to find a way to get there. Yeah. And he was able to write about his experiences. And I want to say that book is like 91 pages. It's not very long.
Very brief. Yeah.
And, COVID-19 is horrible, but it's not a Nazi death camp.
Correct.
And when you kind of put things in context and you look at what you can focus on and how many people you can affect based on how well you're taking care of yourself and the message that you're throwing out from that, I think it's a great lesson to learn from that. I'm glad you brought that book up.
Well, and it's one of those things, I never want to make light of someone's pain, but I do want to provide a window into worlds like Frankl's where you go, hey, here's somebody that was in the worst of scenarios possible. And it's not about, well, my situation is different than his, but what can we take from his situation and apply to our own? And I think there's a lot of power in the shifting of perspective. And I really do think if you have a healthy mind and a healthy outlook, that can flow out into almost everything that you do. Like we said at the beginning, the number one resource you control at your company is you. And so I think there's nothing more important than that.
Austin, this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing some of this. You're always reading, so I'm curious, any more books that you would recommend that might help somebody with some of these conversations that we have to have?
This is one that I'm reading in this season right now, and I think Frankl's book is great. I think the 7 Habits are great if you haven't read those. But this is a newer one that just came out, and I've been going through it in this season. Especially in that idea about just trying to slow down our lives to what is really essential. This is a Christian book. It's written by a pastor out in Portland, but I would say there's application in that for any listener, whether you follow Jesus or not. It's the Ruthless, Elimination of Hurry. And it just talks about how even in other religions, they're still following these ideas that Jesus started about just slowing down your life. And a lot of the points that we talked about today come from teachings that Jesus did. They're just related to Christians, and you don't have to be a follower of Jesus to follow the things that Jesus did. And so this is a great book. I would say if you haven't read this one yet, that would be a great one to read, especially in light of everything that's going on right now.
Austin, the last question, and then I know you have another meeting you've got to get to. I'm curious, what has been one of the top lessons you've learned from this COVID pandemic from both the church world and also the travel world?
And from the travel world, I would say the importance of communicating, even if you're communicating, hey, we don't know, just bringing the team together. We used to do once a month Zoom meetings, and right now we're doing them twice a week for 30 minutes. So not quite the agile framework yet, but just the twice a week meetings, helping people think about the future and helping them to constantly, because it's not natural. Our default, I would say, is to go negative, and to help people stay positive, I think has been the thing that I've, for naturally positive people, it doesn't take that much. But when you think about the idea that most people naturally go negative, then of course you have to remind them, you have to lift them up more often than you normally would. And so the idea of over communicating, even when you don't know, even if you're communicating, hey, we don't know when Carnival is going to sail again. We don't know when Royal Caribbean is going to sail again, but they know now that we don't know, versus them not knowing what we know as the leadership team. So I would say that's been a huge lesson for us in the travel world, and just to see our team continually thank us for communicating with them. And what's ironic is we just got our staff survey back at Gwinnett Church yesterday, and one of the key themes that people said they needed right now was more communication. And I would say that not only goes for the staff of our church, but also goes down to the attenders at our church as well, is that they want to be communicated with. And it doesn't just mean, advertising. That's not communicating. But we've had a lot of success with doing Facebook Lives, Instagram Lives, where people can engage and interact even while they're at home. And so I have seen that even though social media is very, very important right now, doing those live things where you can take questions, where you can take people's feedback, where you can see them commenting and engaging, those have been really, really powerful for both of the vocations that I work in.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks again for sharing those 4 tips. And I noticed they all start with R. Is that the pastor coming out in you?
Yeah, that's definitely the pastor. I want to make it memorable. So I did it for me so that I could remember these. Everything that I talked about today has been out of my own personal experience and things that have helped me try to stay healthy.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Hope you have a great day.